when we started Sweetgreen, the three of us would often say we want to build something that's, generational and can be around for 100 years. I get really excited, even though we're at 240 restaurants, we're public, it sounds really big. It is still tiny compared to what it could be and what it should be. We believe the future of how folks are going to eat represents our food ethos.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Matt Rodbard. Nicolas Jammet is co-founder of the mega popular salad and protein plate seller Sweetgreen and the company's chief concept officer. Now, Nick is an old friend, and I've been reporting on Sweetgreen since the early days, witnessing its evolution from a humble Washington, D.C. storefront to a publicly traded company. On this episode, I asked the question, how has Nick negotiated this incredible trajectory? We find out about his journey, his deep connection to the restaurant industry, and what gets him excited to show up to work each day. We learn about some of the company's big plans for the future and how he thinks about culinary development for a restaurant chain with over 250 locations across the United States. This is such a great talk with someone I deeply admire in food. I hope you enjoy it. Nick Jammet, welcome to This is Taste. Good to see you, my friend. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm great.
Well, I'm great too, because we were across the street from our office enjoying a Sweetgreen salad. And this wasn't just for the interview, because we work at 56 and Broadway, Sweetgreen right across the street. And you're like my lunch guy. You're like I'm always thinking about you at lunchtime.
I'd love to hear that. That's one of my favorite Sweetgreens, so I'm glad we got to be there today.
How do you, when you say favorite, what makes a favorite? Because you have how many now?
Around 240.
Wow, 240. That's grown. I remember when you had 2 in New York.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can go back. We'll go back a little bit in the interview, but when you think about the word favorite, what does that mean?
In a way, there's 240 favorites for different reasons. They're all like children in a way. That one especially just performs really well. The team is really great. We've got a tenured head coach that just, creates a great experience. And so overall, they're just firing on all cylinders.
Yeah. I find it's the lines can be long, but they move fast. And I think I've seen the stacks of the to-go, everyone knows the iconic rows and rows. Where did that idea come from? The idea that you could actually dial it up on your phone and then, look at your name and there it is.
It's a story we don't tell that often, but very early on, and when we were starting Sweetgreen and just reimagining where the concept was going to go, how we wanted to grow, we spent a lot of time just thinking about the customer and what their needs are, and all the different, understanding where the customer's going to go and how do we build the Sweetgreen for the future customer. And it was really interesting, this idea of convenience and how folks defined convenience was just shifting so rapidly. When we first opened Sweetgreen in Georgetown, our little 500 square feet, people would say, oh, wow, I can, walk downstairs, walk 4 blocks, wait 15 minutes in line, and so convenient, right? And fast forward 5 or, whatever years, and people are like, I have to walk downstairs and walk 3 blocks away right. and wait 15 minutes. That's, horrible. So we really, we wanted to build this model that had different engines and could really, just remove as much friction and allow people to order ahead. And so we were very early, almost, one of the first in our category to really have this ordering app, almost 12 years ago. And when we did that, it created this big bottleneck. We realized all these pickup orders at our counter. And accidentally, one of our restaurants in Boston, I remember this at Fort Point, they were short-staffed one day and they had this big mosh pit of people picking up their orders. And they just rolled the shelf out from behind the counter to the front of house. And was kind of like, hey, you just find your name and grab it, go for it. And it was all regular customers mostly. Yeah. And the light bulb went off. We're like, oh, customers actually, they don't even want to wait and ask for their order. They just want to grab it themselves. And honestly, it was kind of the birth of the pickup shelves that you see today in most restaurants. And it just happened with a team member trying it one day.
And there's a real honor system there, obviously. And I'm sure initially you're worried maybe there'd be some, lunches taken off the shelf.
It was definitely a worry, and it's something you would think, but now you see it just adopted across the industry, and it's kind of become the standard for customers.
Look at it. I think you innovated something like self-checkout at CVS and grocery stores 12 years ago. There was none of that. So you predate this idea of automation and just getting this idea that you don't have to do it the way it used to be, right? I want to ask you first, Nick, you're in New York, you live in LA, but you lived in New York and you spent time in LA. So you're going back and forth. But you are such a restaurant fan. And I know this. I've shared a meal with you or two. And I know you're in the new restaurants because you just enjoy restaurant culture. Where are you dining out in New York right now?
Oh man, when I come, I'm born and raised in New York, and so I try to come back pretty often and bring my family here, and so it's always this like push pull of wanting to go back to the old school favorites. Like I can't come to New York and not eat a Stella, which
Yeah.
is my all time favorite. And but then I try to, I want to try the new places. This week, I went to uh, Danny's New Mission,
Yeah, Mission
which
Chinese. Yeah.
incredible.
Just talking to somebody about that. It's kind of like a permanent-ish space now.
I hope so.
Yeah.
The world needs it.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of his cooking. I went to Attaboy last night,
Oh, right on.
which blew my mind. I'd been to Atomix before, but Attaboy really blew my mind, and I'm a big fan of everything they do. I went to the new brown bag sandwich place, which
Yeah.
was great.
And then you live in LA, and I think that you are clearly maybe a West Side guy. I don't know where you live, but I feel like that's maybe your energy. But you're all over the city.
Yeah.
Where should we be dining in LA, if according to you?
I mean, I live kind of like smack in the middle, very
Yeah.
intentionally, so I can get to everywhere.
Yeah, right on.
I lived in Venice for years, but so
That's what I was thinking. You lived in Venice.
I have a core classic, like, Felix is like center of my heart.
Yeah.
Squirrel, Courage Bagel, I go to quite a bit.
Yeah.
Courage is, nothing like that. I love quarter sheets. I mean, anything Evan Funky does, I love. I love the John and Vinny's guys. I
Yeah.
love, anything Nancy does.
Yeah.
So much good omakase in LA. There's a new place, Bar Secco, that's really great. Etra and Telegramma are awesome.
Oh, I tried to get a telegram of this last visit. It looks amazing.
It is
Yeah,
really
it looks
good.
cool.
Yeah.
I love it. Do you feel LA is rivaling New York in terms of restaurant quality? Long pause. Get it? You don't have to answer. Get it?
I think they're different. I think same level, same quality. Obviously, less fine dining in LA. I think people eat differently in LA.
Totally agree.
But
It's an impossible question. I'm sorry.
I think there's like a nice range of food in LA.
Yeah.
I live close to Koreatown, and like there's nothing greater. It's like obviously there's all these places. I'm still discovering places like after living there for 5 years. So yeah, I think in LA there's like more like food crawling. Like you can go to like
Mhm.
SGV for like a whole
Mhm.
day and only scratch the surface. And so yeah, I would say equal but different.
You're the chief concept officer. You're basically linking culinary trends and innovations with like the broader goals of Sweetgreen. And I want to ask you, like, how do you dine out now that you're at this role? You're like the main culinary guy of Sweetgreen. I know you're a restaurant family. You have been growing up in restaurants, but you also are thinking about restaurants in terms of trends. How do you actually dine out?
I think if for me, it's really exciting to draw a ton of inspiration all over the food system, from looking at how people are thinking about growing food to how people are serving it across the whole spectrum of restaurants, from other fast food to old school iconic places to fine dining. Just trying to understand people's relationship with food and food culture and the story they're telling around food. And so I get a ton of inspiration from within the industry, but I honestly get equal amounts of inspiration outside the industry, looking at how folks think about products and debuting products and telling stories in fashion, or all these other industries that create these incredible narratives around product.
Yeah.
And so for me, I spend a lot of time consuming media around food, but also trying food. We have an amazing culinary team, and we spend a lot of time, we try to reserve enough of our time to think about blue sky and to also just like understand the world of food, whether it's trying new things we see in, new CPG products or new restaurants, or even just looking at menus. So we try to, pick our head up out of the Sweetgreen sand pretty often and make
Right.
sure that we're looking at the world around us, because it's changing quickly.
Nick, it's challenging when you're the co-founder of a company and you've got so many co-founder roles, and like your head has to be in the sand at many moments, but then you need to always spark innovation. Is there like one meal that you can point to that you had at a restaurant where you're like, I need to use an idea like that. I need to channel that ethic in my restaurants, in one of my hundreds of restaurants, or even before when it was in the dozens?
There's so many over the years. I would say, some of the moments that have really stuck out the most to me have been, around Chef Dan Barber
Yeah.
in Blue Hill, and just his philosophy around food and what goes on your plate and your relationship with food. And, he's made us rethink so much of, our food system in Sweetgreen and even in our supply chain. We've had the honor of doing 2 collabs with him. One was around food waste. So we did a wasted bowl with him.
Cool.
Again, it made us look internally at our supply chain and rethink how we're using ingredients, how we could reimagine them, all the way up to like in the fields with our farmers of what we were harvesting and how we were harvesting it. And then most importantly, when he debuted Row 7, his seed company, I remember talking to him very early on before he was about to announce it. And he said, listen, I'm launching this thing and, it's all about flavor and really celebrating vegetables and soil for flavor and breeding these seeds for it because that's kind of been forgotten. And he mentioned the Robbins Kogi nut squash.
Yeah.
And I said, great. I want those. Let's do it. And so, they'd never been grown at scale. And I said, we'll try it. Let's give me 100,000 seeds. We'll plant them in 6 farms around the country, 23 acres. Weiser is one of them.
Yeah.
And we hoped and prayed and got all the instructions that it would come out of the ground. And they came out of the ground and then they have to cure. And we had this moment where we got to tell this story around, dropping this new squash, Dan invented a vegetable.
Yeah.
And we got to really drop that and tell that story around why we did it, because it was just the best tasting squash. It was bred for flavor.
Let's get into the flavor, Nick. What makes this squash separate in terms of flavor, and how do you use it at Sweetgreen?
So this was, I think in 2017, 2018. So it's not on our menu today. But what's really exciting about it is you now see it. It was born there, and you now see it at farmers markets all over the country. Because it's becoming, he's kind of creating the new trends in vegetables. And the idea was really exciting is how do you talk about a vegetable with the same excitement that you see other brands talk about releasing their product? Like when Nike would drop a shoe or when a fashion brand would drop a new collection. It's how do we, and we had, literally Dan Barber on a billboard in Times Square holding up a squash. And I don't think people normally put vegetables on billboards in Times Square.
Yeah.
And we had this massive event that, we get kind of made fun of by some of the team. They're like, you threw a wedding for the squash. Like this big launch party for the Kogi nut squash at Stone Barns with performances and we all these food artists and again we wanted to celebrate this incredible ingredient the same way some of the best consumer products are celebrated.
I mean, red badger beets I think about as well. The fact that you can eat these beets raw and shave them.
We had those on our menu too at some point. The badger flame beet.
Yeah, badger flame. Sorry, yeah. That's. I think we've had Dan on the show, and Row 7 is such a tremendous company. And how do you think about scale? I mean, as you grow from your 200 some odd restaurants, and we'll be doubling that in the future, and then maybe the near future. Can you still grow these vegetables that we consider maybe more boutique?
Yeah, scale is a funny word because I think the context is important. It's when it starts, it's not at scale, and some people can't even fathom ideas being at scale. When we started Sweetgreen, people looked at us like we were crazy, and they're like, "That's not a real meal. People don't want that. You're not gonna be able to open a bunch of these." And people's relationship with food has shifted, and we got to be part of that conversation and that journey. But something like Row 7, when I even think back to one of the first main vegetables, the honey nut squash.
Oh yeah.
Now that is pretty you can find it in grocery stores. You can find it. So it took time, but that is getting to scale, and will probably continue. So when you create great storytelling around products, you create demand for them, and when consumers vote with their dollars and demand it, you create more supply.
Yeah, I think that we'll be seeing those beets in our grocery stores soon, and the garlic as well.
The garlic is having a moment now. Yeah.
Interesting. So take us back to Washington, D.C. as a student in Georgetown. I think some of our listeners might not realize that you were a student when you founded Sweetgreen. And take us back to that first month of operating the restaurant and tell us a little bit about what was the format, what do you recognize today that you were doing then, and what is completely different?
So, rewind to 2007, we were 3 Georgetown seniors, Jonathan, Nathaniel, and I. And we, at Georgetown, we were all business majors and minors. And we all had this other thing in common that, our parents were all entrepreneurs and immigrants. And so we saw them building businesses. We understood that life. And then at Georgetown, generally, most people get more excited about the institutional jobs like being a banker or consultant. Mm-hmm. That didn't feel like a path for us. And we, at the same time, had this, ongoing daily conversation around, what are we going to eat? This doesn't make us feel good. We didn't like the cafeteria. The options around campus some of them were tasty, but didn't make you feel very good. And just nothing really spoke to us and spoke to where we thought people were going with food. And so we wrote a business plan. We decided, let's solve this ourselves. Raised $350,000 from, during our senior year, from anyone that would talk to us or consider us, old bosses, friends, one of our teachers, entrepreneurship teacher, wrote us a check. I interned for Joe Bastianich. She wrote us a check, was one of our first investors. So all these folks from around food or, other folks in our life wrote us these tiny checks, $5,000 or $10,000 at a time.
Wow. Really that small?
Yeah.
Because you needed 350. Adds up, I guess, but you need quite a few checks.
Yeah. And then so we found a site, 560 square feet, a former burger landmark tavern that was, again, 500 square feet. So not that much bigger than this room.
Yeah.
Landmarked, no power, no water, no sewage, just like concrete box. And we're like, perfect, let's open a restaurant here. So today we wouldn't even drive by a site like that. But being Georgetown, we lived in Georgetown. We went to the university. We understood we were the customer. We were building it for ourselves. We knew the students would love it. We knew being on M Street was great. So we had full confidence in it. And so we started construction, started building, and opened 2 months after graduation.
Oh my gosh. And so that first month, are you serving guac greens? Are you serving the kale Caesar? You're doing probably some froyo, maybe?
Yeah. So the menu to begin was salads, froyo, and wraps.
Oh.
And so the name Sweetgreen comes from soft serve and salads, Sweetgreen.
Oh, right.
So pretty creative, I guess.
It worked.
And,
it worked. It hung around a little bit. Yeah.
And it's and so the beginning, it was really simple. It's like source really great ingredients, prepare them like freshly, and do as much as we can in 560 square feet, and make it this customizable bar so people can get exactly what they want and need, but then have a treat. And so around the soft serve. And so, yeah, we opened our doors August 1st, 2007, and it was a lot of lessons.
I mean, we can talk about the lessons learned, but I want to just make sure the context is clear. But in 2007, the salad bar restaurant was really something. There were only a few of them in New York. Mostly they were like delis that had a cold bar or some person working behind the counter tossing in ranch dressing with like maybe romaine if you're lucky, but probably iceberg. And so the innovation of doing a salad bar with local ingredients and really fresh ingredients was innovation. Did people get it right away?
We had a core customer that got it, and our customers were narrower back then. The average person was like, well, that's not real food. That's not a full meal. We also didn't have a soda fountain, which people thought was wild. We had compostable packaging, which people were like, wow. And so, and at the time, there was even like the soft serve frozen yogurt trend. I think at the time there was like one pinkberry.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing was kind of novel. And so for folks that wanted to eat like this, they were really excited. And so little by little, the idea was that could you take this type of food and wrap it in a design and a brand and experience that was just so cool that people wanted to come in. So it was like, we're not going to tell you to come eat your vegetables or be healthy. We just want you to associate with the brand and the experience. And when we wrote the business plan, we looked around and all the food that was the most craveable, that people had the most access to, that were the coolest brands, were all the least healthy. And we're like, why can't we do those things for food that's good for you?
Such a challenge, though, because on the culinary side, you make a face, because on the culinary side, that's where you really step up, because you need to make sure these are craveable dishes or salads that actually have a calorie count and macros that make sense. I mean, are you just totally ripping up the playbook when it comes to doing like craveable food, or had it been just sitting there in plain sight and just not done in a QSR type of situation?
I think a combination of the two. I think we had conviction in the product, and like the idea of we saw the consumer wanting to really opt into customized experiences, and then removing friction. So the idea that you could, assembly line, make it really fast. And this was as Chipotle was really growing quickly. Yeah. And that service model was really, popular. And so folks understood that service model. There was a high convenience factor. And, we wrapped it in a really great brand that told a story around this kind of food and kind of put it on a platform or pedestal that this kind of food had never been put on before.
And you did music festivals.
And we did music festivals.
We shall not forget the Sweet Life festivals.
That's right.
That were done every summer. I never attended one. I did to one, which was nice of you. But I thought that was really cool. I remember being in your location in Nomad, and I believe there was a DJ there.
Yeah.
I think was that like, so like, I feel like the brand, your instincts, it's kind of aged with you and your two co-founders. I feel like, like a DJ set or a music festival might not be your current vibe, but back then it was certainly that.
Yeah, I mean, the brand over time has been a reflection of the three of us, but what's really exciting over time is we've now built this incredible team of folks that also understand food in the world, and so it's become a nice combination. But, when I talk about building a brand, like music and the festival and experiences were a big part of building community around this kind of food. And the festival started because we opened our second restaurant in DuPont Circle right at the farmer's market, and we had 0 customers.
Oh,
and
wow.
we're like, oh no, we have to actually do something to create community and attract people here. So we bought a speaker, popped it up outside. My co-founder Nate is also has DJ skills, so we would just be blasting music and like inviting people on weekends out there. And little by little, it turned into a block party, which turned into we like somehow convinced Hot Chip to come DJ in the backyard there.
So ill. Love that choice. What a choice.
And then we like met the folks from 930 Club who owned Meriwether Post Pavilion, and we said, let's do this right. And so then we somehow booked the Strokes, and that was the beginning.
I feel did you book Kendrick Lamar? Or
we had Kendrick twice. We had him when he was like tiny, like, and he wasn't even headlining. And then we had him in 2016. And you have to remember, you have to book these acts 6 months before their albums come out. So you have to kind of like take a bet. And he wasn't even, it was him and The Weeknd that year. And it was the year both those crazy albums came out. So we got very lucky and fortunate with timing. But Kendrick was, and Kendrick would come in and eat Sweetgreen. And, we did this like collaboration with him that was like Beats Don't Kill My vibe.
Yeah, I remember that.
And it was really a great moment for us.
Yeah, I remember those shirts. It was super iconic. And it's definitely an era, I think, in New York, if you lived here, when Sweetgreen was that era of Sweetgreen. Beats Don't Kill My vibe.
Yeah.
That level of like, you're talking to millennials.
Yeah.
You're absolutely. And now, as a publicly traded company, you have over 200 stores. You do not speak to one audience anymore. And so, was there like a moment when there was like a culture shock within, not shock, but like a cultural change in the company as you kind of got bigger?
I think it's more of just a conscious evolution, and there's like things that are more thoughtful during an evolution and things that are unexpected. But as we evolved and grew, I mean, our aspirations were, we built Sweetgreen to really, be the defining food brand of our generation and want to build the next great American fast food brand. And so we knew that scale was important, also to really ultimately have an effect on the food system. Like, scale matters. And it goes back to this idea of kind of conscious capitalism. It's like the bigger we get, the more impact we can have if we stay true to the ethos. And so as we grew and evolved, there's different moments in our history that defined us, and that was one of them. I think as we scale and reach all these different parts of the country, we're in 21 states now, all of, every region of the country now, and we want to speak to a broader audience, but we also want to stay true to the core. And that, that core audience that really, and customer that fueled our growth and were there from the beginning. So we're very conscious to kind of balance the two of how do we really speak to that core loyal customer, but also just, make it accessible and invite new people into the funnel.
I mean, customer acquisition is the name of the game, and getting people into the app, getting people to load up money, and really, we'll talk about some of the moments in the restaurant later. I want to hear about, you're in 21 states, and you've got this ethic, this ethos that you have to stay local. Local is like part of your ethos, but you're like not local. You're like this massive country. That seems difficult, to make sure every location uses farms that are within, I would say, a short drive, relatively short drive. How do you do that?
Yeah, our food ethos. So as we've scaled and evolved, we've been very conscious to really make sure to really define the food ethos that we want to scale into. And, in our history, we've sourced a ton of local stuff and really celebrate this idea of sourcing from the right farmers. But the core of the food ethos is, and again, there's a double click on this by category of food, but generally it's about serving really fresh, unprocessed, whole ingredients raised and grown the right way. Animals raised right, no cooking with seed oil. So there's all these different points in it. But when it comes to especially produce, it's definitely, we love to celebrate seasonality and regionality and sourcing from the region's greatest growers and a lot of these great local growers. But for us, the intent is more on how something is grown versus exactly where. So something being 99 miles versus, 200, but if it's grown in this farm that's using regenerative practices, that's organic, that's, using the right seeds or labor or soil management, like those things are definitely
are
important.
I mean, the carbon footprint, all that stuff, you try to pay attention to that, but sometimes you have to make sacrifices, essentially.
Yeah, but even for us, it's like working with growers that are doing things the right way and think about, soil health a certain way. That also just leads to better tasting ingredients. So all that stuff is, there's definitely like an environmental impact, and we have carbon goals. But ultimately, selfishly, part of the reason we source this way is because we just think the food tastes better.
Yeah, there's definitely an effect on the culture if you're thinking about these sustainable practices and using like the products that have like there's a farmer and not just a farm or like or a corporation. It's going to taste better.
Yeah, and so you walk into every Sweetgreen today and there's a chalkboard that lists all of our ingredients. And so it's not, our food ethos is not about being 100% local or local for local's sake. It is, we love celebrating regionality, but it's about full transparency and clean ingredients and things raised and grown right. And talk about another interesting thing. It was like, I remember putting up that first source board in restaurant number 4 in Logan Circle in DC, and people thought we were crazy. They're like, in fast food, no one needs to know where your ingredients come from. I'm like, no, we're sourcing from the best like farmers and some at the DuPont Farmers Market that all the fine dining chefs are sourcing from. I want people to know. I want to get credit for this. And now it's kind of hard to walk into any restaurant or interact with any fast food restaurant where they're not telling you somewhere, like having some sense of transparency or
they try
pretending. But and that for us was interesting. It's like when you lift the curtain between customers and their food, they start asking questions at other places. They're like, oh, well, I know where the food's from here. Like, where's your food from?
Yeah.
And they just want that information then.
How challenging was it to cook without seed oils? Because I think that at the scale that you're at, I think that that's probably uncommon in our country.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were the, and correct me if someone finds someone else, but we couldn't find any national chain that has done this or is committed to that on the oil side. And for us, it was important because part of the evolution is really understanding, our ingredients, our menu, and customers in a deeper sense as the world evolves. And this conversation around seed oils has just grown pretty dramatically, and something that we felt was very important. We had always only used high oleic sunflower oil, which has a great fatty acid profile, actually very similar to, especially when we're not frying with it. But for us, the flavor and attributes around extra virgin olive oil and avocado oil were so strong that we wanted to really switch to those. So making that switch last year was pretty huge because, I think, again, in terms of like trusted food, if you're out there at a chain or in any fast food or fast casual setting, even folks, even in some fine dining restaurants, it's hard to really understand all the inputs in your food. So if you have a place that you trust and and that's important to you, it's really exciting for you. But if you don't care about it and you hear us talking about it, now you're asking questions about, well, maybe I should think about the oil that's going into my food. But we believed in it so strongly, we said, you know what, we will figure out how to get credit for this and make sure that the price value is there. And just, we have other levers in our economic model that we can balance out. But ultimately, it was important to us, so we made the investment.
We'll get to the pricing of Sweetgreen soon. I think that I have a couple questions about that, and I think our listeners probably do too. But first off, I want to ask you about the Harvest Bowl. You've sold 30 million of them, and you launched the Autumn Harvest Bowl recently. What is the R&D process like when you're like, I want to actually do Brussels sprouts hot now, which, before they were like more room temperature or cold, and like at the scale of your operation and trying to do it, nationwide, it's probably a little aircraft carrier turning style than just you picking up the phone, right?
It's really the R&D process again has evolved, but it's still really exciting. And even though we have 240 restaurants, I think we've tried to balance maintaining enough of the speed, agility of a startup with, I guess, the discipline and execution mindset of a public company. And when you find that sweet spot, it's pretty great. So we look at our calendar a year out and we plan these big moments, and the seasonal moments are really important to us. So, we've had a pretty big menu transformation the past year and a half, launching protein plates and steak. And so Brussels for us was really exciting because it was going back to this, like, again, speaking to the core of our ethos and our customer. The seasonal menu that launches has always been big moments for us. And again, treating a Brussels sprout like, this incredible consumer product that we want to drop and tell stories around. So how we tell the story of the Brussels sprout and how we make it just really craveable. This year we added this like sweet, sticky, salty maple flavor to it that was really great. And just a lot of excitement around it. So for us, that process starts a year out with our marketing teams, our culinary teams. We spend a lot of time talking to customers to understand even like what names work, what flavors work for them. So it's kind of a balance of art and science.
Yeah, and so you're working on next fall right now.
Oh, we're working on all of 2025 right now. We've got some big things planned for 2025.
Some big things. I mean, speaking of this year, you launched the protein plates, you launched steak, which is a huge moment for you. And I'm noticing there's no wraps happening in the restaurant. And you launched with wraps and you launched with soft serve. Obviously, soft serve is so challenging. We know that that's why you're not doing it. But no wraps.
Yeah, I would say definitely a great observation.
You're being so polite. You're being very polite.
No,
here.
Great observation. I would say the past year and a half, we've been on a pretty big menu transformation, just a really focus on a lot of exciting, broadening of the menu, the categories, adding all these great new flavors. We have another exciting year of that planned. So I would just say, stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Yeah. Things are under wraps here currently, but maybe check this space later. Okay, that was a keen observation. Okay, the question I kind of teased at earlier is that, the pricing, and I'd like for you to break it down because I think there are people listening, and I probably said to myself, This is getting expensive. These salads are expensive. That's a lot. When you have 3 salads, it's like over 60. Maybe throw in an awesome Rice Krispies treat. We'll get to Malcolm's Rice Krispies too. Man, I want to hear about those. But when you hear that, man, Sweetgreen is too expensive. How does it make you feel? And what do you say?
Yeah, it's we spend a lot of time thinking about the overall guest experience, and when it comes to that, really thinking about not just price, but really price value.
Yeah.
So really thinking about, folks are going to pay a certain amount based on the journey they pick, right? And so it starts with also having a range of pricing. So our approach is making sure that if you want like a simpler $10 bowl, or if you want it like fully loaded with like double protein, the range is there from like 10 to 20 plus. And so, or if you want the Rice Krispie treat or the drink, so like that range is kind of there for you to select, having more entry point pricing all the way to.
Dude, I do the $12 order sometimes. I'm like, how can I get to 12? Yeah. And I'm like, man, I got to 12 today. Yeah. I'm not always at 12, but I'm trying to get to 12.
So I think that's like pricing strategy, but I think the broader price value, and we've talked a lot about this so far in our conversation, is how do we make sure we are getting credit and sharing the stories around everything that goes into that food, like the true cost of this food, from the oils to how we source to the incredible team members that are scratch cooking in our restaurants, and even how we design our restaurants to the source board. How do we make sure that folks understand everything that goes into that price? So price value is a big one. And for us, I think pricing has been a really interesting dynamic the last year or two, because if you look at the consumer, and you just look at the range of, what's happening with inflation and pricing across all the restaurant categories, I feel like the differential between us and some other folks is shrinking. So, we obviously are premium, but I think we are the difference in how much more Sweetgreen is versus some like other fast food folks.
I'll say the golden arches, if you hit that touch screen and you're doing like orders for 3 or 4, it might be in the 20s, it might be in the 30s.
So we're seeing some interesting dynamics of like trade up from folks that are like, hey, for $1 or $2 more, I can get this.
Yeah.
And some interesting trade down, because restaurants have also gotten expensive. So on like a Tuesday, Wednesday night, when maybe you would have gone to sit at the bar at somewhere or order delivery, you're like, well, I'd rather spend $25 for dinner and get delivery versus 60 or 70. And honestly, when you talk about the price value, the protein plate launch was actually pretty intentional around thinking about something that had really strong price value for dinner, especially. And so we've seen that since we've launched, customers really opting for that at dinner, because, we were talking about this earlier. If you're in one of these mega cities, especially, like you open your ordering app, so on one of these like marketplaces or anywhere, and to get a solid protein-centric, hearty plate of food that you trust and that is delicious and clean, for under $20 is like kind of a deal.
Yeah, you're giving Grubhub like $4.99, so like you got that going for you too,
And so for us, it's been really interesting to see how our customers are using our products across the spectrum of day parts and the range of pricing. But it's something we're really conscious of. We want to create value for customers, but at the same time, we want to pay our farmers what we want to pay them. We want to make sure team members are getting paid right. So the whole economic model and all the stakeholders and then we have to be profitable. We're a public company, and so balancing all those things is challenging, but we're on a great road there.
So with the rise of Ozempic, obviously protein plays a role in that diet choice. So do you think about the changing taste when these injectables become part of our culture, for good and for bad? But I'm not, to say they're all bad, it would be ignorant of me. And I know the books program here, if you look across Penguin Random House, we are publishing so many protein cookbooks, and it's affecting our work. It's got to be affecting your work too.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's interesting to look at consumers and their relationship and connections they make between food and health, and the rise of these GLP-1s is really interesting. There's a really funny analyst report that kind of said that these GLP-1s actually become a tailwind for someone like Sweetgreen, because if you're eating less, the food you are cutting out is actually more of the junk food and the processed food. And when you do have to eat, you're going to eat something that's a little more nutrient dense and protein rich. And so, I don't have, a direct opinion on the GLP-1s. I think what's really most important is folks understand like the root cause of and the power of food.
Yeah, I would imagine the tailwind is real, because if you're eating one meal a day too, you probably want protein, but you want good protein and well-sourced protein. So I think there's going to be a lot of tailwinds in food, that we attribute to these injectables. So what's the future of Sweetgreen Media? I use a capital M here. I've always admired the way your company has embraced print. You've always had printed materials in your restaurants, in newspapers. You've always had incredible art. There's like a real visual identity. And I feel like Sweetgreen is a media company in many ways. I know you don't publish books or magazines, but I remember you had some great magazines in your Nomad location. I remember you could show up and there'd be cool magazines on the rack. That's how far back I go with the brand. So how do you think about Sweetgreen as a media company? And do you have any book plans?
Yeah, great question. I would say if you zoom out, I see one of the superpowers of Sweetgreen as a business and brand is really our, the storytelling aspect of and our connection to food. And so, I think over the years we tell our stories around food in different ways through like physical assets like newspapers and print. Really a lot through experiential elements like we've talked about the festival. But, one of the things we focus most on, especially emerging from COVID the last year or two, is like how do we bring back this sense of like community and physicality and bringing people together around food. And so when we talk about media, for me, it's this broader narrative of like storytelling. So at some point there'll be a book, we'll want to like capture
what kind of books do you want to do?
Our stories. I'm going to come to you for advice. We have a bunch of ideas, but you're one of the experts.
Hey man, you can roll with us at Crown. I would love to have you here. We have some very talented editors.
Yeah.
We'd love to work with you.
We'll definitely be coming to get your advice. And there's, we definitely want to tell our story in print form also. But, I think for us, storytelling in media is everything from, our campaigns, how they come to life, to the experience you create in the restaurants, to some of the larger physical experiential things we want to do. I mean, even with our Brussels sprouts campaign, it's probably one of my favorite campaigns we did. And I have to shout out our creative team, Jillian and Micah, did this incredible job of bringing this like incredible, aesthetic to the farm. And we brought these creators, Aki and Kochi, who are these fashion creators, this famous old Japanese couple that do these like fit checks. And we brought them to the Brussels sprout field and we did this whole photo shoot with them and put them in this new Sweetgreen gear. And we just, kind of celebrated the Brussels sprout like it was a fashion campaign.
Yeah, you clearly bring fashion into the world. I mean, you've had Naomi Osaka as well as a spokesperson. You've had, fashion shows in fields. It's cool. I mean, listen, you could be doing it many ways. You could be doing it like a bland fast food chain and is growing with that. But I think you guys get style points, and I know you don't do it all for bottom line. You do it because you're creators and you're like wanna actually be original.
Yeah. Thank you.
Nick, what gets you out of bed in the morning, jumping out and ready for work? What excites you the most?
Every morning I get up super grateful that I get to be building something, a company that is creating great change in the world. So I think this idea of like changing the food system, redefining fast food, it's like, that's a big idea. And we started Sweetgreen, the three of us would often say we want to build something that's, generational and can be around for 100 years. So, I get really excited, even though we're at 240 restaurants, we're public, it sounds really big. It is still tiny compared to what it could be and what it should be. There are thousands or tens of thousands of restaurants of all these other fast food chains. And we believe the future of how folks are going to eat represents our food ethos. And so we want to create more of that change in the world. So every day I get up excited and grateful that the product and the stories I put into the world are doing good.
So Nick, how do you think about the CPG products at checkout? I feel like we've got Malcolm Livingston's amazing Rice Krispie treat, but better squares. But you also have like you have Gia there sometimes, you have Spindrift, you have like brands that I really like that I connect with. You have Olipop. How do you think about that?
We've been having a lot of fun there. I mean, historically, we haven't had that many brands in our restaurants.
Yeah.
We were very kind of protective of the experience in the counter space. And obviously, historically, finding products that fit our ethos was tough, whether it's like what's in it or the materiality. But we've really been broadening and trying to have some fun with some of these like, future food brands that are telling great stories. And so we had a lot of fun, creating the Sweetgreen treat with Malcolm Livingston. He is, I think, one of the greatest talents in the whole industry.
I love Malcolm.
He's a star. And so that was really great. We did a collab with Siete Chips. So their first kind of collab product, we took our Green Goddess Ranch dressing and turned it into a chip flavor. They are an incredible company, incredible product, all avocado oil. So felt really good about that. And then, Gia, we really thinking about our beverage offering. We have Gia in a number of our cities, New York, LA, and Miami, I believe. I just really love the product, and she's one of my favorite founders and entrepreneurs of all time.
Yeah, Melanie is terrific. I think we have a lot of founders listening to the show and many on the show, and I think many covet that slot at Sweetgreen. So how do you scout talent for that slot? I mean, should they just like hit you up on Instagram? I'm joking. Or should they like think about a product that addresses a certain need that you're looking for?
Yeah, I would say all the above. We are incredibly curious at Sweetgreen, and we want to taste everything. So the amount of samples we get sent to the office is amazing, and I love it. And a lot of them make us think differently about what we should serve. A lot of them were like, we want to serve this. And so I feel like the world of CPG is rapidly changing, and it's really exciting to see. So I love tasting everything. So if you have a great product, send it our way.
Would you ever do retail? Would you ever go into that realm? Not just selling salads and whatnot, but like actually selling food?
Probably not a focus for us, but, never say never to most things.
Yeah. Good answer. On This Is Taste, we ask guests about their discerning taste. So to close this interview, here's a little rapid fire, fast and furious taste check. Nick, are you ready?
Yes.
The best fruit.
Figs.
Wow. What a California answer. I love it. What makes a fig so special? It hasn't been actually mentioned that often in the show.
Really? There's certain fruits that when they're at their peak season, there's just nothing greater. And a fig is just so sweet and creamy. And, I find myself like having one and then I finish the whole basket within 2 minutes. So.
It's so true. The worst vegetable.
Tomatoes out of season from the grocery store.
Yeah.
Even though it's technically a fruit, I guess, right?
It's a fruit, but it counts in, spiritually, it's the same. Yeah. Right. And you don't serve those time. You don't serve that kind at Sweetgreen.
No.
How do you actually think about tomatoes, though? I mean, this is a big question, and I know we're at the end of this, but like, it's like you've got 21 states worth of locations. How do you keep your tomato game in check?
Yeah. Our supply chain is made up of so many great regional growers, but it's also like the foundation of it is like some of the country's largest great organic regenerative growers or folks that are just like, doing things the right way. So I actually think a lot of our tomatoes come from Lipman in Florida, who is an incredible grower, really focus on even like the labor on their farm. They've got a great program and then how they treat the soil. So for us, it's really focused on, especially in like the Northeast where things just don't grow for parts of the year, on how things are grown versus exactly always where.
Have you checked out the farm?
I have not, but our supply chain team has been down there many times.
Yeah, that's cool.
I should go check it out.
Yeah, it'd be cool. Like, I feel like you do visit.
If you want to come, we can go for a tomato farm tour.
Go check out Lippman Farms. Yeah, why not? The best dessert?
Cannelé and soft serve.
Together.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so is this served somewhere, or do you just like riff this at home?
No, I mean, two separate, but also together would be good.
Oh, I see. It's like a semicolon there. Okay, I get it now. Okay.
But together would be delicious.
Yeah, together would be delicious. And I am imagining the combi cannelé was a favorite of yours.
Yes, I miss it dearly.
I miss that dearly too. What a special restaurant dish. All right, a few more. A restaurant you are most excited to visit in the world?
The Harbor House Inn in California.
Oh, tell me about it. I don't know it.
It is, I think, in Mendocino. It's kind of off the grid, pretty like remote, but everything's grown there. It's supposed to be like an incredible culinary experience, and then you stay there, and it's like this gorgeous like seaside landscape, and so
beautiful. A restaurant you would like to bring back from the dead?
I have to say my parents' restaurant, La Caravel.
Yeah. I feel like that's a restaurant that if you read the New York Times from like 1970, 1990, there is always going to be a mention either as the society pages or the culinary pages. What's so special about this restaurant?
It was like a different era. It was like full 3-hour lunches, like this, it was a full, just like a different point in the life of food in New York. And I think it had such a place in New York's history. And so many folks had, great memories there and great meals there. And, I grew up there. And I just feel like it had a very different perspective when it came to like classic French fine dining, but also kind of more modern hospitality and sense of community there.
Yeah, yeah. A favorite city outside America to visit for food?
I mean, Tokyo.
Yeah. You try to make it with some frequency?
I used to go quite a bit. And since COVID, I've not gone. So I'm dying to go back there with the kids.
Is there an international plan for Sweetgreen?
My answer is always yes, in a few years. And I've been saying that for 5 years. So yes, in a few years.
In a few years.
Yeah.
We don't have to go further on that, but I think it would probably do okay.
One of my dreams in life is to have a Sweetgreen in Tokyo.
Yeah. I think that would
be a lot of fun.
Align. I mean, the design questions that you just are asked. Oh my gosh. You'll do it.
Yeah, we will one day.
Last one, your favorite sandwich?
Honestly, I'm a sucker for like a room service club sandwich.
What hotel?
Most any. I will say I have a special place in my heart for the club sandwich at the Bristol Hotel in Paris.
Yeah. What? Take us through that sandwich a little bit.
Like the layers, the ratios, everything. It's great.
Yeah. And the mayonnaise choice?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. The answer is yes.
Extra mayo.
Extra mayo. Yeah. I'm sure in France it's like the homemade aioli and not one of the American brands. Nick Jammet, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining This Is Taste. What's up, Eliza? How are you?
I'm good, Matt. It's been a while since we've caught up.
Well, you know what? We've been traveling, and you just took a really cool trip to the Pacific Northwest. Tell me about it.
Yeah, I was in Seattle, which I think is maybe the best food city in the country.
Wow.
Bold statement, I
Bold.
know. I mean, I think there are many amazing food cities in the US, but this was my second time in Seattle, and I just have such phenomenal meals when I'm there, and specifically like meals that I think are kind of hard to find in other places. And the first restaurant that I went to that was really special is called So Fun, and it's a Cambodian restaurant that was on BA's top 10 like best new restaurants list this year, and that list happened to come out like kind of shortly after I was in Seattle, so we managed to get a reservation, and it really was just like such incredible food. They specifically do Khmer cuisine, which was passed down to the chefs from their great grandmother to their mother, Sofan, who the restaurant is named after. And their family are, refugees that survived the Cambodian genocide, and they really kind of take this opportunity to share Khmer culture and cuisine really seriously, but also just have a lot of fun with the food on the menu. There are a lot of things I had that were really good that I would shout out, but a couple would be this, they call it like kamerage fried chicken. It was so juicy, like maybe the best fried chicken I've had in recent memory.
A kamerage, I like this. So it's like a karage. It's like a little bit of a wordplay.
Exactly, which I'm not sure if that's a really common phrase for it, or if that's just what they were doing at this restaurant. When I Googled, I couldn't really tell, but it was really delicious. This like seared mushrooms with a spicy tomato relish and their house chili oil that kind of goes on everything. And then also this kind of braised pork belly dish that's called, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, but kasak kruk, which is pork belly slow braised in tamari coconut milk with pickled and fried shallots, and it's kind of savory and sweet. And I had this very cute experience of having this bite at the end of the meal, and in unison, my girlfriend's dad goes, "Oh, this is so Taiwanese." And I go, "This tastes just like Rosh Hashanah brisket," which obviously braised pork belly does not really taste like Rosh Hashanah
but there's
brisket.
like flavors that remind you of the table.
This kind of like sweet, savory, like somehow it had this like almost like alcoholic, like red wine braised kind of feeling going on. It just was a really special meal.
The food of Cambodia is something that I think we've obviously written a lot about Thailand and Vietnam, Laos a bit more, but Cambodia feels like it's a little bit less covered in our media.
Yeah, I think Cambodian food is so special, and we're lucky here in New York. The chef that does the pop-up Krung Cambodia is actually opening a restaurant that
really?
I think
breaking
it's
news here.
Open. I mean, it's been in the ether, but maybe new to the podcast. It's going to be called Bong, which I believe means friend in Khmer, and it's opening in the old Ursula space. I'm not sure quite when, but I know I'll be going as soon as I can.
I have to zoom out ever so slightly, and you're saying this is the best food city in America, Seattle, and this isn't like the halo, the glow of a recent trip. You went there a little while ago, so you've been to other cities since then. So man, I like this statement. Yeah.
It was just such a good meal. And then I followed it up with another really good meal at a restaurant called Family Friend, which is a Guamanian restaurant. So it's food from the island of Guam, which I don't think I'd ever had before, which also is what I'm saying about Seattle, just kind of having lots of pockets of different kinds of culinary representation. And I had actually the best corn soup of my entire life at Family Friend. They're famous for a Kewpie smash burger. They actually went viral for that. And the chef has said that he put that on the menu for the neighborhood kids. Like he didn't actually like really want to be known for this necessarily. And it was a good burger, but really this corn soup is a coconut, soy, corn, chicken soup, kind of partially pureed, and then it has little chunks of corn and chicken in it. It was just so incredible. We also had these empanadas that they call like chamorro empanadas, which is the largest ethnic group in Guam. So it had like beef, potatoes, peas, and also golden raisins. And it's kind of the experience of eating there. You really get a sense of the fact that, Guam is an unincorporated U.S. territory. It was colonized by Spain for a long time. It was occupied by Japan for a couple of years during World War II. Like there's so many different influences that come into the island that were on the menu.
I've never heard of a Guamanian restaurant ever in my time. This is incredible.
It was awesome.
Very cool.
And there were a lot of like food people that were clearly there. The guy sitting next to me at the bar just walked in, and I knew that he was a chef based off the tattoos alone. And then how he proceeded to interact with everyone throughout the meal, I was like, okay, this is definitely a right instinct. So I would highly recommend going to both of these places if you're in Seattle.
Yeah.
Then
I have to shout out my interview with Renee Erickson will be forthcoming in the coming couple months, and I had a great talk with her.
Yeah.
So.
There's one more thing that I did in the Pacific Northwest that I wanted to tell you about, which is that I went crabbing. Have you done this before?
Never have. What's that all about?
Like going to the bay and then taking out a boat
in the
throwing out crab pots and then hoisting up crabs.
Wait, I was thinking like you were doing like tidal crabbing, like dipping your hand into mud, but you actually went out on boats with the pods.
Yeah, and we were
That's
like,
cool.
we were not prepared, I would say, for how intense it was going to end up being. They were selling gloves like for extra, right? And we were like, oh, we don't really need gloves.
You're
and
like, that's a scam. You're like New Yorkers. You're like, that's a
yeah,
scam.
literally. Me and my sister both got pinched, started like bleeding all over the boat. Like
shit.
it's serious business.
Yeah.
You hoist up the crab pot, and I just wasn't expecting us to actually catch that many crabs. But all of a sudden, there are just like 30 crabs in the boat, and they're all scuttling around, and you have to pick them up and measure them. You can only keep male crabs of a certain size. So all of the female crabs get thrown back to repopulate. All of the smaller male crabs get thrown back. And we caught maybe like 50 crabs, I would say. I think we had to toss back all of them except for 4, but we ended up having 4 male crabs that were big enough to keep, which there were 4 of us in the boat. So that was kind of perfect.
Yeah.
And we took them just straight back to the dock, and they cleaned them and steamed them for us.
Oh,
and
cool.
then we bought like a little plastic cup of chopped garlic and butter, and then microwaved it and had garlic butter to eat the crabs with. But
So how do you do this? Is there like a name of the operation?
if you go to, we were in Rockaway Beach, actually, like not Queens Rockaway, but Oregon Rockaway. And there's all down the marina little places you can go to where you can rent a crab boat for the day. I think it was like $60 an hour. And then you also have to have a fishing license that you can get there. But honestly, if we had not caught anything, still would have been fun just because you're on the water kind of driving around. But getting to like catch and eat crabs right there was kind of the perfect Pacific Northwest send-off. So that's my other recommendation, is that especially like in the summer, early fall, like it's kind of perfect time to do it.
Definitely. And so how far from Portland is this crabbing operation?
This was like maybe a 2.5-hour drive. We actually did a little cute road trip where we went to a mushroom foraging spot that my sister has, and we got a ton of chanterelle mushrooms, which was really special, and then stopped at the Tillamook cheese factory.
Oh, yeah, right.
Where you can get like ice cream and lots of cheese, obviously, and then ended at the coast. So it was kind of a little progression.
So in Portland, I'm putting you on the spot. Is there like a favorite restaurant in Portland that you keep going back to?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm not even mentioning Portland because there's great food there too. We went to Hot Yai, which is this Thai place that's, I think, very known for doing fried chicken, but all kinds of things that they do are special. We had like a white curry with brisket burnt ends in it, which I'd never had before. That was really cool.
Oh, cool.
I had some really good pho when we were there. And then when I was flying to the airport, I got a banh mi from one of the many delicious drive-through banh mi places in Portland, and then ate that on the plane, which was like the best plane food I've ever had.
Yeah, I love that. I think Pacific Northwest, fall into winter, it's a great time of year to go there.
It's a great time to go. The farmers markets are really beautiful there. I think it's a combination of just there's really high quality seafood and produce out there, and then also just so many different immigrant groups that have brought culinary traditions with them and made like really special restaurants.
I have to shout out Du's, which is the teriyaki chicken spot in Portland. I write about it in Korea World. Amazing teriyaki. I don't know if you ever tried Du's before.
No, I wanted to because we published a really great profile about the history of teriyaki in the Pacific Northwest.
Of course we did. That's right. Shout out to that.
Which we could link to in the show notes maybe. But it was just one of those things where somehow there weren't enough meals in the day.
Definitely never are.
You know, luckily I have a vested interest in going back. So maybe my next trip I'll go.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll bring, producer Clayton along. Maybe I'll show up and we can do a little like road trip. And
yeah, we can go back on the crab boat too.
Oh, let's go on the crab boat with the microphone boom. I could see you, Clayton, getting some nice sounds there.
Yeah, the sounds of us screaming as we get pinched by crabs. I'm going to bring gloves this time.
Yeah, you should. Well, thanks for sharing that, Liza.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
This is Taste is hosted by Eliza Abarbanel and me, Matt Rodbard. The show is produced by Shalia Harris and Pat Stango and edited by Clayton Gumbert. Theme music by Steve Rydell. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter for updates on all cool things that are happening.